The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferentz.
Lawmakers in Michigan considering legislation to rein in employers who make you work when you're not supposed to be working. Meanwhile, the Alliance for Retired Americans celebrating a Supreme Court ruling on mail balloting. And today on the show, our featured guest comes from the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. Welcome to the Monday, July 6th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Brandon Elvey will be our featured guest on the show today. He currently serves as the Secretary-Treasurer for the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. Here's a website you need to go to, brs.org. Now, Brandon has held previous positions with the union dealing with arbitration and regulatory advocacy. He is a proud member of Local Lodge 48, which covers Baltimore, Maryland, and has worked as a signal maintainer for Amtrak. And previously, he was an educator in Pennsylvania with his Bachelor's of Science in Education. A couple things we're going to get into. Number one, Union Pacific's application to acquire Norfolk Southern Railroad. You may recall Norfolk Southern was the railroad with the accident in East Palestine, Ohio, back in 2023. We're going to talk about that. Now, it's of the opinion of the Brotherhood that this possible merger, has the potential for negative impacts to safety for workers, also competition, and overall rail service for customers and all Americans. So where do we stand with this? He'll give us an update on that. We're also going to talk about safety at railroad highway grade crossings, the emergency notification system. There's signs at crossings. You do need to pay attention to those. They are there for your safety. And right now, railroads are currently pushing to deregulate and reduce testing on the equipment at those grade crossings. Brandon points out that these regulations have decreased accidents and have proven effective since they were implemented back in the 90s. The whole idea here is trying to keep all the people that operate the trains and the American public safe. Not seems to be happening, though. brs.org is a website for the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. The segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. How about this? The Michigan legislature is considering the Workplace Employee Boundaries Act. What's that? It's a bill which would establish a right to disconnect. Now listen to this. If passed, the law would prohibit employers from mandating employees to respond to workplace communications outside of normal working hours. How many times has that happened to you? You're playing with your kids in the backyard. All of a sudden the boss says, "Hey, Joe, I need to talk to you." Well, maybe come into work. We got a couple of issues. And you got to do this maybe off the clock. Employers would have the option to compensate employees for being on call, with employees setting hours of expected after-hours availability. Violations reported to the state's Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity would be met with fines or mandatory overtime pay, which critics argue could be harmful to small businesses who depend on the institutional knowledge of fewer employees. State Senator Erica Geis, who introduced the bill to the Michigan Senate, said about her proposal that in an increasingly always-on, always-available economy, we have to take action to protect workers and create stronger boundaries. Now, if the bill passes, it would be the first right-to-disconnect law in the country, following similar initiatives in Australia, Portugal, and other countries across Europe and Latin America. This is certainly one to watch. Well, the Alliance for Retired Americans is a happy group today, all because of last week's 5-4 Supreme Court decision in Watson versus the RNC. Actually, the Mississippi Alliance for Retired Americans was an intervener in that case. Mississippi law has worked well for decades and protects workers and voters who do exactly what the law requires. They cast and mail their ballots by Election Day. The court, the U.S. Supreme Court, correctly recognized that no eligible voter should lose their voice because of mail delays or other circumstances beyond their control. That's a comment from Rich Fiesta, Executive Director for the Alliance for Retired Americans, who says we welcome that decision because it protects the rights of millions of Americans, especially older voters, to have their legally cast ballots counted. Now, the court's decision means that voters in the 14 states that provide a grace period for regular mail ballots and the 29 states which allow additional time for at least some mail voters, including military and overseas voters, can breathe a little easier. By upholding these long-standing protections, the court has preserved certainty for voters and election officials, respected the ability of states to administer their own elections, and protected election laws that millions of mail voters across the country rely upon. We'll be hearing more from Rich Fiesta later in the show. We always check in with him each and every month here on America's Workforce. There's other good news, too. Another Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court sided with common sense and upheld a landmark law, which passed a couple of years ago, allowing Medicare to negotiate lower prices for some of the most expensive prescription drugs used by older Americans. The court recognized that drug corporations should not get special treatment when they do business with the federal government. For 20 years, says Rich, Alliance members fought to give Medicare the power to negotiate better prices, and the law is already lowering costs for seniors at the pharmacy counter while saving taxpayers billions of dollars. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the Secretary-Treasurer of the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Farrens.
And remember, you could check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast. AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to our featured guest right now. That would be Brandon Elvey. Brandon is Secretary-Treasurer of the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. The website you want to go to is brs.org, brs.org. And right now they're about 10,000 strong. Well, we got a couple of things. The application to acquire Norfolk Southern Railroad by Union Pacific. We're also going to talk about the recent Long Island rail strike. And this talk about railroad highway grade crossings. There's a lot we want to discuss, and Brandon is going to answer all my questions, right?
I'll do my best. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. We should point out that the Brotherhood is among about a dozen unions that deal with the rail industry, which has seen a lot of changes over the years. We talked recently with one of the members of SMART, that's a sheet metal air rail transit division. And we're talking about the rail safety bill. Brandon, a little bit different discussion today. Let's just get right into it. And well, first off, how's the union doing right now with everything that's been going on here in recent years? What do you think?
No, thanks for having me on. No, it's been a busy time for us, a lot with the deregulatory agenda that's going on. We've been putting a lot of work into that. A lot of open bargaining is going on. So staying busy in those realms. And we have a convention this year. So it's been staying busy this year and a lot of kind of moving parts.
Yeah, the Brotherhood is part of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. And I know Sean O'Brien was recently reelected to that organization. I know you merged with them some years back. Any word on rail safety? You know, we had a recent conversation with Jared Cassidy on that. Are you hearing any movement about that legislation in Washington?
Not so much from our end. Our legislative director has been keeping eyes on it. We know it's moving through. There's been a couple of different efforts to try to move it. Seems like this bill at least has a little momentum.
Compared to making sausage, you know, it's not pretty. Hopefully the end result will be something to relish. We'll see what happens here, but I'm not holding my breath right now because, I know the rail lobby is very, very powerful, and they're going to try to do everything to water that down. Let's talk about this Union Pacific application to acquire Norfolk Southern. And boy, I've seen so many mergers over the years, and I would say probably 99% of them are not good for workers. And I would only assume that that's exactly what's on the horizon here. Why don't you tell us what's going on right now?
So to your point, mergers rarely work out for the workers. There's a lot of promises on the front end, and then when the actual mergers go through, workers are kind of the ones left holding the bag. With railroad mergers, they go through the Surface Transportation Board. That's the agency that'll be reviewing that application and making a decision to either approve it or deny it. On this one, they will have a new framework where they have to find that it's to the benefit of the public interest. That was new requirements put on. They weren't applied to the CPKC merger that recently occurred, but we've got our eyes on it. Like I said, it's bad for the workers in this case too. It would afford Union Pacific a 40% share of the railroad market, which is problematic for customers, the public, especially when we came out of the struggles with the supply chain after COVID. Union Pacific was one of the bigger offenders with embargoes and just their safety culture in general has been problematic over the past. So if their actions are anything to judge them on, we just feel that this would be a bad decision to let them merge with or take over Norfolk Southern.
Brandon, I can only assume you've been pretty vocal about this with the members, the key players, and also Congress. Just wondering what you're hearing right now. What are they saying about this?
Our members, we did communications with them and just trying to inform them on what to expect, the different steps, the protections that are afforded through New York Dock if this does go through. And then on the other side, we are part of a coalition, Stop the Merger Coalition, and that's ourselves, the Teamsters, the rail division, so the BMWED and the BLET, along with several associations for customers with the chemicals and fertilizer. So it's the Congress members. I think we're trying to get through to them. They've been receptive, but again, it goes back to Surface Transportation Boards, that agency. They make the decision. They're independent. So a lot of it's we're been in their ears, but at the end of the day, they know it's not their decision per se to make.
Do we have any idea on job loss should this merger go through? I'm sure you've watched mergers in years past, and you know the results. I'm just wondering if there's any calculations on that right now.
Well, according to Jim Venna, their CEO, there will be no job losses. So if we're to take him at his word, really it's going to be good for everybody, good for the public. Reality, our craft, at least, we've already seen about 20% reduction in our membership on just Union Pacific. So if they are to be able to acquire Norfolk Southern, they would likely sell off some small lines. Again, they aren't saying that, but as they do that, you can see expanded territories and you could see some job losses. Again, according to them, and it'll depend to part of their application to the STB, they're supposed to lay out their plans for the workforce. Here's the numbers we see if we're adding or taking away. But again, that's what they portray. Usually the reality once a merger goes through is much different than what the promises were at the beginning.
Yeah, what they say and what they do are two different things. I think we know that story. Norfolk Southern, if you don't mind, that is the rail line that was involved in East Palestine, Ohio, back in February of 2023. I'm just wondering, because of what happened there, did that make them ripe for a takeover? I know they changed CEOs and everything, and there was a tug of war on Wall Street with the stock and all that. But I'm just wondering, is that part of why we're talking about this now?
They've been a target for a while. The Canadian Pacific was looking at them a few years back, and there was discussions they were going to try to take him over a merge. So that really boils down to there's basically two West railroads, Union Pacific and BNSF, and two railroads that are primarily on the East Coast, which is CSX and Norfolk Southern. So you have these constant attempts to get this transcontinental railroad. The East Palestine thing, one thing we've seen is they have made some efforts to work with at least our craft in creating some new safety programs to try to actually make some improvements on safety. A long ways to go, but there has at least been some effort from Norfolk Southern, and that's the concern we have if Union Pacific takes over, if that kind of all goes to the wayside.
So getting back to this proposed merger, it's in a holding pattern right now. This is where we speculate a little bit. Do you think something's going to happen between now and the end of the year, or what?
They had to refile their application. I think this is the third time. I would think the STB would make some form of a decision by the end of the year. They've given them a couple tries on refiling their application, and once they do that, we'll probably get some indication by the end of the year, and then obviously how it plays out afterwards. But they basically are the ones that will have to decide. There can be hearings and different components to get all the facts and input from all the parties.
Well, I promise you we'll stay on top of it. Brandon, I got to take a quick break here. Brandon Elvey is our featured guest on the show today, Secretary-Treasurer of the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. The website is brs.org. Brandon is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. Held previous positions with the Brotherhood dealing with arbitration and regulatory advocacy. He is a proud member of Local Lodge 48, which covers Baltimore, Maryland, and worked as a signal maintainer for Amtrak. And we'll continue the conversation with him right after this. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LIUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org. The Heat and Frost Insulators and Allied Workers are proud to be a title sponsor for America's Workforce Radio. The Insulators Union is leading the way in the mechanical insulation industry, fire stopping, and infectious disease control. Regarded as North America's energy conservation specialists, these professionals are known for their professional work and dedication. You can learn more about the Insulators Union at insulators.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And don't forget, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Let's go back to our featured guest today. Brandon Elvey is his name. He's Secretary-Treasurer of the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. BRS.org. All right, we talked about this proposed merger here with Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. Let's talk about the railroad highway grade crossings. And I think it's important that, we make sure every day here on America's Workforce that workers are safe. And obviously anything that is done at these railroad crossings is as safe as possible because, these trains, they come barreling through. You want to make sure that you get proper warning and you make sure that the crossings have what's needed. Let's talk about that. And apparently over the years, here we go, deregulation. Deregulation could play a major role in making those crossings less safe. Talk to me about this, Brandon. What's going on?
Right now, the AAR, which is the Association of American Railroads, they're sort of the lobbying arm for the major railroads in the country. But they've been on a push, and they have been for years, to try to roll back regulations, unleash prosperity, so to speak. But primarily for us, our craft is responsible for maintaining those railroad grade crossings, along with the signal systems that make sure trains don't run into other trains, they don't run into people, don't run into the traveling public. Part of this deregulatory push is to reduce the testing on those pieces of equipment, specifically grade crossing warning devices. Right now, we test them every month. The railroads think we only need to be there every 3 months. They believe that there's technology that'll catch what the human eye is doing today. These regulations, though, have been around since the 90s, and since they were implemented, there's been a correlation with the reduction in incidents, accidents, and deaths at these railroad crossings. So we don't believe there's any need to reduce them. If you have extra technology, it can overlay and work along with them.
So the technology has helped, but you still need human eyeballs. You need workers there. You mentioned when these regulations went into effect back in the 90s, so 30 plus years ago, we have seen a significant, can you quantify that? A significant decrease in accidents as a result?
Yeah, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, But the Federal Railroad Administration is the agency that governs the railroads for safety. You can track on their numbers just the decrease from what was occurring prior to 90, and then as these regulations were put in place and tracking it, just seeing the reduction. And there's always room. The goal is always zero, but there will always be some incidents. But basically, since these regulations were put into place and they're common sense ones, we've seen, again, reductions in accidents and issues at grade crossings.
So, Brandon, let me ask you this. We know the rail lobby is pretty powerful, and they have a way of convincing members of Congress. Is this something that Congress has to decide, or is this just in the current administration? Because you mentioned here, right now, they're being inspected every month. They want to go to 3 months. That's got to raise a few eyebrows here when it comes to the safety of communities. But what's the process here?
So it goes, and we touched on briefly before, the rail safety initiatives that are going on in Congress, trying to get those legislation passed. With these, they are regulations underneath the Federal Railroad Administration. So that is, they can come in, make new rules, they can amend rules. So they have most of the say so on it. It can be legislated. That is something we're trying to look at is ways, if you can, to make some of these regulations law. But right now, the Federal Railroad Administration is the one that controls it. So it is sort of left to the whims of the administration and some of these executive orders that are basically instructing agencies to look at ways to reduce regulations and rules.
Well, you saw that coming in, especially with the second Trump administration. They want to eliminate a lot of regulations. I often say on the show, they're there for very good reason. And I mean, they may seem cumbersome, especially to the people in charge, the owners. In this case, it would be the rail industry. But the bottom line is, we're talking about the safety of those on the train, the safety of the community when that train goes through the community. I mean, we don't want to see another East Palestine, Ohio. And I know train derailments happen every day in America, and this is something that has to be addressed. All right, let's wrap up with some good news here. And I talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago when I heard that there was going to be a rail strike in Long Island, which affected a whole lot of commuters. Wow. Apparently you got noticed on that one. Maybe you could speak to that.
Bargaining underneath the Railway Labor Act, which is the governing law we're governed by, it's a long process. So they were bargaining for 3 years. You go through mediation, try to get to a deal, and when you don't, there's a lot of cooling off periods. But yes, in this one, we went through 2 presidential emergency boards, both of which had sided with our proposals, what we were asking for. And we were in a coalition with 5 other rail unions, which is a big deal. Working together is really what brings this and made it all possible. But yeah, we got to the end of the cooling off period. We bargained basically all the way up till midnight. And at that time, MTA wasn't getting too serious. They were throwing things in at the last minute. So it is pretty rare to see a rail union go on strike just because of the framework and the impact we can have on the whole economy. So it was not something we wanted to do, but something that had to be done in this situation. And it worked to get the agreement that our members deserved and had worked for.
Now, can you maybe spell out some of the terms, what you were able to accomplish here as a result of that strike?
Yeah, and it's really simple. The main point for our coalition, so our union and the other unions, was the 4th year, so in 26, to keep up with inflation. We just wanted, there was, and the PBs had recommended, the one had recommended 5, the other one, I think 4.5. So it was really that 4th year, the 4.5 GWI was the big sticking point. And again, the 2 PBs had sided with us on that, so we knew we were in the right. MTA had the money from congestion pricing, so that was really it. Otherwise, it was the basic GWIs, and there was another union on property that had already taken the deal out. So basically, similar to theirs, just getting that additional fourth year to keep up with inflation was the sticking point for our members and what we kind of hung out for.
Well, it took a lot to accomplish this. I mean, you had to deal with the Railway Labor Act, which is, that's a problem in itself because of the structure of it. And then you had a number of unions and getting everybody at the table at the same time. And did I hear correct? This went on for several years as far as getting this done?
Fortunately, it's relatively the norm for both our rail unions and even our brothers and sisters with a lot of the air unions. Because you voluntarily bargain. If you can't get anywhere, the NMB, National Mediation Board, will invoke mediation. And then once you're in there, it's up to the NMB to release you. So even if you feel like you're at impasse, it's always their call. So we've had agreements where we're bargaining for 10 years because you get hung up in mediation. You can't get anywhere. But yeah, this one went on for 3 years.
Amazing. Just amazing. Well, congratulations on that. That was a tough one. And obviously it got national attention because that's like one of the most congested areas in the country.
Got people's attention a little bit when the trains weren't running. So
yeah, exactly. All right, Brad, anything else you want to add here before we button it up? I know there's a lot going on. We covered a lot and I appreciate your time here.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate the opportunity to be on with you guys and the work you do. And just stay safe.
There you go. Yeah, you know what? I always say this show is my show. It's your show as well. Okay. We appreciate what you do. I mean, you're keeping America running, and that's what we want. And doing it in a safe way, too. That's the important part.
Safe and efficient. Yeah.
That's right. BRS.org. Brandon is the Secretary Treasurer of the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen. You take care, my friends. Stay safe and stay in touch, okay?
All right. Thank you. Take care.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, Boilermakers Local 154 in Western Pennsylvania. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's